bringing you unique perspectives from inside the world of addiction and mental health recovery. This is Recovery Unscripted.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Recovery Unscripted. I'm David Condos, and this podcast is powered by Foundations Recovery Network. Today's guest is Glennon Doyle, author of the #1 New York Times bestselling memoir, Love Warrior. For this episode, she sat down with Foundation's Chief Marketing Officer, Lee Pepper, at the Innovations in Behavioral Healthcare Conference in Nashville. In this open conversation, Glennon shares her views on the all-encompassing significance of sobriety in her life and how we can break through the social constructs of masculinity and femininity to become more fully human. Now, here's Lee and Glennon.
Glennon, thank you so much for being our opening keynote speaker here today in Nashville. It was such an honor to have you on the stage and just to hear really your powerful message to that audience. And I was so happy to see a really good mix of women and men today.
Yeah. And I mean, women, men, but all warriors for people. I mean, these, mental health professionals are my people. They're the ones who are serving people who get forgotten, and I just feel honored that you all trusted me with this group.
Well, thank you. It was so enlightening, and I wish that's one of the reasons that we do these video podcasts for our audience nationwide that might not have the chance to travel to Nashville during the summer to hear your talk. Gives them just a little snippet. So I'm looking forward to figuring out a way that we get you to another conference.
I'm sure it'll happen again.
One of the things that you mentioned in your talk, we were talking about sharing your story. And we created a movement called Heroes in Recovery 5 years ago when Betty Ford passed away. And we were reflecting on her life and her impact in our field. And we were so surprised to learn that in 1976, when she shared her story of alcoholism, that she really came on the public scene in 74 when she was one of the first women to share her story of breast cancer recovery. And back then, the media didn't even call it breast cancer. They called it female cancer. Mm-hmm. And so we fast forward, we wanted to figure out how can we create some type of social movement to fight the stigma, because we felt like it was that stigma that was keeping people from raising their hand to get help. And you had a line today that said that we have to share from our scars. Mm-hmm. And I wrote that down, and I just, that is such a powerful line. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could maybe expound on that just a bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in this age of, where the words vulnerability and truth-telling are kind of buzzwords, and we are promised that if we're just open and honest and we share our stories, that will be healing. And it is in some ways, but it isn't in other ways. So what I see for people in early recovery is, now with the internet and social media, people are sharing their stories widely while they're in the pain of them. And then what happens is they share their stories and people kind of shrink back, and then they don't get the reaction that they wanted, and that's hurtful. And so what I think about that quote that my friend Nadia Boltz-Weber says all the time, which is that when we're sharing widely our stories, we have to share from our scars, not our open wounds. For me, that's super important to know the difference. So in our early recovery, and when we're just figuring things out, we do share. We have to share. We're only as sick as our secrets. We know that. But we have to choose with whom and where we share our stories very carefully. So those are small groups, right? Those are recovery groups. Those are therapists. Those are, our dearest, our nearest and dearest. When I'm in current pain, those are the people that I share with. Probably a handful of people, right? And then later, when I've had time to be still with my pain, and I'm not in the freshness of it, and it doesn't sear me anymore. When I've learned to find the wisdom inside of it, that's when I know that I'm ready to share, right? So I just think we have to be careful, because if we share too early, we end up it feels more like a cry for help than an act of service, right? When we're sharing widely, we have to be doing it for a purpose. We have to have an intention behind it. And when we're sharing widely, the intention has to be to serve, not to get a reaction that we need. That's where I think sometimes people end up getting more hurt than even when they began.
We were so honored to have Abby Wambach your wife with us today also.
Yeah.
And she asked a great question that I thought was very brave. It was about what is sobriety? And I wonder if you would take just a couple of moments and share with the audience some of your comments to that question today.
Yeah, I mean, sobriety to me is magical. It's a path that leads me deeper and deeper to the truth of things, to the truth of my heart, to what I would call God, what some people would call love or truth. It's not, sobriety to me is not just not drinking or not doing something, right? It's a discipline. It's a religion to me, really. I mean, if a religion is just a set of ideas that gets us, further to the truth of things. For me, in the very beginning, sobriety was just not drinking, not binging. And then it kept taking me further and further. The more I learned to just be still with the pain of being human instead of numbing my way out of it with booze, I found that if I just did that, if I just dealt with life on its own terms, right, which means to me that I feel everything, right? I feel the brutal parts of life. I feel the beautiful parts of life without feeling like I need to numb it away. Then it took me further down the road and I realized, okay, now if I can deal with life on its own terms, that's the first part of sobriety for me. And then the second part is after a while you start to, this idea of integrity comes into your life, okay? So integrity for me means, the literal term, it means integrating, right? Integrating my outer self with my inner self. So many of us when we're in addiction or mental health, or actually everybody, okay? We have two very different lives. We have our outer lives that we show everybody, and then we have our inner lives where the real ourselves lives. I have to, as a person walking down the road of sobriety, integrate those two lives. I have to be the same on the outside as I am on the inside. And because I fought so hard for my sobriety, for my sanity, my recovery, I expect a lot from myself there, right? To the point where when I realized I needed to, that my health and my sobriety, which are completely dependent on living in the truth for me, meant that I needed to move forward with a divorce from my husband. I had to do that publicly just weeks before my book on marriage redemption came out. So that was a huge challenge of my integrity, right? I mean, I remember my agent saying, okay, you can do this, but that will be career suicide. And I remember thinking, okay, well, as a person in recovery, I have to always choose career suicide over soul suicide, right? That is staying on this path of integrity is so important to me. So that's the second part of sobriety. And then the third part comes where you realize, oh my God, I can protect my sobriety. I can protect my peace by creating boundaries and being radical in my self-care. You become strong enough to only allow into your life that which brings you peace. And whether that's people or situations or energy, that's been beautiful. God, I'm 41 and I'm finally learning to let go of what doesn't work for me and to keep close what does.
When I opened up the introduction of you this morning, I referenced Betty Friedan. And I made the comment that I believe your book or books are an important connection for this generation with those first and second wave feminists. And I look at my boys, and I want my boys when they're in high school before they go to college, to read Love Warrior. And I wonder, have you reflected on how you are that bridge, not only in sober, alcoholism community, mental health, but also with these important feminist ideas?
Well, first of all, I mean, I consider myself a fierce feminist. Everybody in my family, you're not even allowed to be in my family if you're not a fierce feminist, right? But really, what's interesting about that in terms of Love Warriors, I love that you said that, but really what Love Warrior is it's about allowing ourselves to be fully human, right? I think, the culture tells girls that you're only allowed to be these parts of human, right? You're only allowed to be pretty, and you're allowed to be happy, and you're allowed to be grateful. You're not allowed to be angry. You're not allowed to grow. You're not allowed to desire, okay? And then it tells little boys that you're only allowed to be this. You're allowed to be strong. You're not allowed to be vulnerable. You're not allowed to. So these ideas of femininity and masculinity make it really impossible for real women and real men to be fully human. Because these ideas of femininity and masculinity are crap. They're all socially constructed. All of us are just fully human. Women can be angry and fierce and strong, and men can be tender and vulnerable. And if we don't allow men, both boys and both little girls, and men and women to be fully human in spaces, right? then we're going to find other ways to act it out, right? We're going to hide from each other. And that's kind of where all of our pain comes from. So yeah, I mean, I think that I want little girls to know that they're allowed to be fully human. And I want little boys to know that they're allowed to be fully human too.
I think that in reflecting about that comment in your book, Love Warrior, in one of the scenes where I think it was your college boyfriend was made fun of for leaving a voicemail and had the word love in it. And I think that's the kind of message I want to get across, to my sons, because I still see that every day going on in our culture. Oh. And it's like, how do we attack that in a healthy way to give our young men that confidence?
Okay. First of all, I'm freaking out, Lee, because I have never thought about that. I like that part of that book being a specific shaming of vulnerability.
Right.
That's so true. God, I mean, bless the boys' hearts. Like, they are not allowed to be soft in any way. And they are every bit as human and feeling as we are. It was just Father's Day, right? And I talked to several girlfriends of mine who all said how hard it was for them to call their fathers on Father's Day because they don't talk to their dads. Right? They talk, but in very shallow ways. They talk about the weather, and these are the only things that boys are allowed to talk about. Right? So then they become grown men who aren't connected to their children in meaningful ways. And that's because the culture has taught them that they're not allowed to talk about those vulnerable things, and they're shamed out of it in every way. And so I think that we've got to start young with our little boys. So that when they're grown up, they can relate to everybody, and that's what we do. We create spaces for our little boys, and we allow them to be soft, and we don't tell them that brave boys don't cry, right? And we don't tell them that, we don't say be a man. What does that mean? We teach them what being a man is, and being a man is being fully human and being tough and vulnerable, right? We redefine what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman for our children.
Well, just to kind of wrap up, you said on stage that your editor is pestering you right now with he needs how many words you've written so far. So we just want to encourage you. We can't wait for your next blog post, your next book, your next appearance on Oprah or any of the network. So we just really are blessed to have you here, and thank you so much.
Thank you for trusting me with these beautiful people. I'm so grateful for your work.
Great. Thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Glennon for sharing that with us. Now I get to close the show by featuring another powerful story from the Heroes in Recovery community as part of our ongoing series called Hero of the Week. This week's story comes from Kira O, who shared it on heroesinrecovery.com, a grassroots movement where over 1,400 people have contributed their stories. During her high school years, Kira struggled with an eating disorder that she later realized served multiple roles in her life, from self-medicating to providing control and identity. By the age of 15, she was experiencing severe symptoms. Her parents intervened, and Kira found herself in residential treatment, where, as she puts it, she chose to give life a chance and surrender control. Now, years later, she's passing on the lessons she learned throughout her recovery journey to help others navigate the admissions and discharge stages of the addiction treatment process. As Kira says in her story, "My struggle doesn't define me, but it does refine me. Recovery begins when we learn to accept ourselves and accept the imperfect journey and gift of life." Thank you, Kira, for sharing that and helping to break the stigma around addiction and mental health issues. If you'd like to read Kira's full story or share your own, visit heroesinrecovery.com. This has been the Recovery Unscripted podcast. Today we've heard from Glennon Doyle, activist, philanthropist, and best-selling author. For more about her work, visit Momastery.com. And thank you for listening. Please take a few seconds to leave us a rating on your podcast app and subscribe so you won't miss any of our new episodes. See you next time.